Okay, all the viewers on Diplomacy Direct, most welcome. Today we have another exciting session with Professor Rick Fisher. Today we have a lingering topic over China again, and today we are going to look at it from a very different perspective. So, Chinese President Xi Jinping says, and I quote, with more than 5,000 years of civilized history, the Chinese nation created a brilliant Chinese civilization, made outstanding contributions to mankind, and became a great nation of the world. CCP is 100, and the power projection knows no bounds. Today, again, Professor Fisher will take us through the entire PLA's role in CCP, power progression, and the multi-angled view into China's play for its hegemony. So welcome, Professor Fisher, to Diplomacy Direct once again.
Bipul, thank you for having me join your program once again.
Great. So, Professor Fisher, let's touch base upon these factors one by one. So, China's military strategy built an influence of CCP over PLA and its role in protecting China's evolving national and political security interests and CCP's propaganda. Can you throw some light on it, please?
Yes. The Chinese Communist Party in China has absolute authority. It exists largely to sustain and increase its power. That really is the main and principal product of the Chinese Communist Party is power for the party and securing that power and vanquishing its enemies and becoming the principal power on Earth and, just as important, the Earth-Moon system. The party, since Tiananmen, I would argue, has come to the conclusion that due to the simple osmosis of foreign influences over the Chinese people during the 1980s, which the party had no control over, leading to the Tiananmen incident, really the most fundamental challenge, existential challenge that the party has faced in its history. After violently suppressing this protest, really, not an uprising, the party decided that it had to exercise increasing control over the rest of the world in order to stifle the kinds of influences from helping the Chinese people to decide that they could do without the Chinese Communist Party dictatorship. So what we have witnessed over the last 40 years has been the Chinese Communist Party's program of building up its economic, political, and military power in order to extend its influence increasingly in all of those realms around the world, and to eventually not just be able to project military power as precisely and as much as it chooses, but to combine that with the kind of economic and political power or coercion, if you will, that might avoid the need to deploy ships or brigades of troops, but nonetheless be able to approach every country on the earth make an inventory of that country, decide who is and who is not their friends, and to make sure that friends rise to positions of power versus enemies, so that the process of control, integration of economic ambitions and plans, political ambitions and plans, all contribute to the power position and to the strength of the Chinese Communist Party. And there's a kind of a timeline to produce this overall global power and effect, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
And that is by the middle of the century. By the middle of this century, China wants to have the most powerful array of economic levers, political levers, and military levers to make sure that all countries understand that as they take that next step forward, it is being taken in agreement, if not with the approval of the Chinese Communist Party.
Mm-hmm.
But in Australia and New Zealand, elite attack has focused primarily on the economic elite, and making sure that the right companies, leaders, if you will, get the contracts, and the contracts always require that those individuals defend and advance Chinese goals in their own society. I mean, it goes to the point of Chinese nationals very loyal to the PLA. People that come from the intelligence structure of China have been elected to parliament in New Zealand. And you look at the United States, where the approach has been primarily at a very narrow elite level, focusing on the China studies community, the China analytic community, both outside and inside the government, but also on economic elites and political elites who can be turned by their regional or local economic elites.
So on those lines, so CCP says that PLA plays a crucial role in safeguarding China's national interests and its unification. What do you want to say about that?
Well, yes. The party's dictatorship rests completely on the power of the PLA, or more precisely, on its control of the power of the PLA. The party repeats as ad infinitum that Mao Zedong's old dicta that the party controls the gun. It goes to great lengths to impose a cadre of political commissars on all aspects of the PLA, and one can well imagine that it infiltrates covert observers throughout the structure of the PLA in order to detect even the faintest notes of variance, and so that it has the power to decide whether to and how to deal with that variance. A simple conversation over a beer to a bullet in the back of the head. That's all options are there for the for the party to ensure that it controls the PLA. The PLA, from an optical perspective, is also essential for the party to achieve its global aims. The PLA conveys to the world the power of the party, as in the constant parades, in the mobilization of all media to promote the power of the PLA, to promote love and admiration of the PLA throughout China. It does a very good job of that. The worshiping and cyber love of the PLA is one of the approved cyber activities in China. Many other activities are not approved and are expressly suppressed, denied. But for the party, the PLA not only sustains its dictatorship, but from an optical, a propaganda, a political perspective, the PLA is also essential for the party to convince the world of its looming and imminent overwhelming power, its ability to defeat all comers, including the United States, and to convince all other leaders in all other countries that the party is to be admired and obeyed.
So the CCP has a new, plan with, so the
PLA is now getting into Tibet.
Getting one member of each family joining the PLA as a resistance towards, what they saw the Indian Tibetan forces, the special forces did the last time. So how do you equate that with PLA's plan of being a dominant threat to India in one way or the other? And on the similar lines, can you touch base on the Tibetan youth getting into the PLA?
I'm not sure if this is a very recent development. I would have expected that the party would have been trying to use the PLA to anesthetize, if you will, Tibetan culture in a positive, get them to join way since the 1960s. Maybe it hasn't worked. Maybe they're trying new approaches. I expect that the same has probably been tried in Xinjiang with the Uyghur population. It probably hasn't worked. Therefore, they've gone to the opposite route, which is to brainwash, and if they can't brainwash, then we suspect exterminate. Here you're pointing out a very important enterprise for the party, and that is the co-optation of elites around the world. What is happening in Tibetan culture is one manner of approach, almost a feudal manner of approach, if you will, and this could happen continuously around the world. I mean, imagine China conquering Taiwan. How is Taiwan pacified? Well, you can imagine that a good deal of the population might be shifted to take the place of those in Xinjiang who've been eliminated. And camps that exist to indoctrinate, brainwash the people of Xinjiang could soon be used to brainwash the people of Hong Kong, then Taiwan, or consider Arunachal Pradesh if China should decide to invade and take over that province of India. You can well imagine that those Indian citizens or former Indian citizens would be cycled through the same facilities in Xinjiang or elsewhere, or facilities erected in Arunachal Pradesh itself. What I have here is really is important is the chart on the bottom of the page, in which I try to estimate where the PLA will be in terms of its overall power projection, key power projection indices in 2030 and then in 2040. I think by 2030, the PLA will be on its way to a level of 4,000 nuclear warheads. It could have up to 6 aircraft carrier battle groups. about 150 large transport aircraft, and at least the beginning of one manned moon base. Now, look a decade out, I think it's quite comfortable to predict that the PLA warhead levels will increase to 5,000, both in terms of deployed warheads and a reserve. There will be over 10 aircraft carrier battle groups. Large transport aircraft indigenous large transport aircraft could top 350. And China could have up to 10 bases on the moon. Now, moving along, let's look at conventional power projection first. With the last two aircraft carriers, China has demonstrated that it can assemble and launch an aircraft carrier in 3 years. So it's moved out of the dock and moved to the side of the dock. And of course, more work has to be done in order to be ready for commissioning. But the real number here is that 3 years. The big shipyard in Shanghai that's now producing the first conventional takeoff aircraft carrier will basically build that carrier within 3 years. And it could build two carriers at the same time if China chose to do so. And we can't forget that in Dalian, Shandong Peninsula, there is another shipyard large enough to build aircraft carriers.
Okay.
And after, let's say, the next aircraft carrier will be conventionally powered, I estimate. But after the fourth aircraft carrier, China will start beginning to produce nuclear-powered aircraft carriers, and all subsequent carriers may be nuclear-powered, at least the very large ones. And China will be unique in that it will start building all nuclear-powered carrier battle groups. We have strong indications that China is planning to build nuclear-powered underway replenishment ships, as well as nuclear-powered large escort ships. This will enable China to send a carrier and its support at speeds up to 35 knots around the world. So, for example, if China wanted to invade New Zealand, it could probably get to New Zealand with its nuclear-powered carriers in 6 to 10 days. That's probably faster if you're thinking about projecting into the Indian Ocean to help defend Pakistan, help defend Iran, what have you.
So basically, the support for all the global maritime operations for BRI, and then the overseas interest, which also help into the expeditionary exercises that they are into. Could you throw some light? So basically, PLA's commitment to nuclear deterrence sounds mutually exclusive from the global perception, yet it boasts to be collectively exhaustive, which typically describes its dichotomy. Could we talk about that?
Sure. I would say that since the 1970s, when foreign analysts and officials, government officials have tried to approach Chinese diplomats, the Foreign Ministry, the People's Liberation Army, to try to engage in just preliminary dialogue about nuclear weapons, to find out what are their intentions, how can we avoid conflict, whatnot, all the various agendas of the arms control community. The Chinese have proceeded on two basic tracks. First, they have been absolutely untransparent in regards to their intentions and capabilities. They've sought as much as possible to hide or really to direct global opinion and conclusions about China's nuclear posture. They have sought to create the impression that they have a non-threatening and limited nuclear posture. They will not engage in arms races. They do not want the same numbers of weapons as the Americans and the Russians. They are not going to use nuclear weapons first, especially against non-nuclear countries. If you want to talk about arms control, then it's the Americans that need to be talking to themselves, not talking to the Chinese. They've avoided completely any kind of official and useful dialogue on nuclear weapons. I mean, it's been quite a spectacle to behold over the last 40 years or so. But as we move into the 2000s and the 2010s, we begin to see stirrings, mobile ICBMs, the beginning of the development of multiple warheads, first on older liquid fuel ICBMs. And then into the 2010s, we see much more activity. A second, and then possibly a third generation nuclear ballistic missile submarine. Second and third generation submarine launched ballistic missiles. Construction of thousands of kilometers of tunnels to hide mobile ICBMs. And then in the last 6 months, all bets are off. Liberal pro-arms control organizations in the United States that have the money to afford commercial satellite overhead find that China is now building up to about 236 silos in the western, very unpopulated desert areas of China. And the candidate missile for these silos is called the Dongfeng 41, DF-41, which is assessed to be able to carry up to 10 warheads. Now, some assess it can only carry 6, but the Chinese aren't going to tell us. They might demonstrate 10 warheads in a test, or they might not. But what we're now looking at is the possibility of China moving into about the 2025, 2026 period with over 3,000 warheads. The United States deploys a little over 1,300. We assess that the Russians deploy a bit over 1,500.
Okay.
And this imbalance is not the whole story. Russia and China, in my opinion, may cooperate in terms of offensive nuclear targeting. I say this largely because for the last decade, they have been engaging in increasing levels of cooperation in regards to nuclear defense. And I conclude that it's simply logical that if the Chinese and the Russians are cooperating in terms of nuclear defense, they've at least spoken about and probably are implementing programs for nuclear offense. So by the middle of this decade, in terms of the nuclear picture, the Chinese could be undermining completely, along with the Russians, the basis for deterrence. They will be using this power for coercion. There have been a spate of statements in Chinese state-controlled media around the revelation of the latest batches of missile silos that really indicate China is abandoning its limited and defensive nuclear posture. It is already engaging in virtual nuclear terrorism against Japan after Japan made statements to the effect that it might help defend Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion. We have a video produced on a military-owned or controlled web page stating that China will use nuclear weapons against Japan first, use them repeatedly, and then end up dividing Japan into 5 countries. I mean, it really very tough stuff. And the statements in the Global Times point to the conclusion that China is going to use its nuclear power to coerce the United States from defending Taiwan in the event of a Chinese invasion. That is job number one, goal number one for the new nuclear and conventional power of the PLA.
Again, the next factor that we can pick up is the space, right? So as we spoke about 10 bases by 2050, 2040 on moon. So basically China's counter space capabilities, where PLA is developing anti-satellite capabilities, including research and possible development of directed energy weapons and satellite jammers and the anti-satellite missile systems that they tested in July 2014 as back as that. So now how does this come along with PLA and their counter space capabilities?
Okay, all those things you mentioned, Vipul, will continue to grow and get better. But in order for the PLA to be successful militarily in low Earth orbit, in order for its dual-use space station to conduct military missions, the space combat platforms that you mentioned, in order for them to be successful, in order to secure communication satellites, in order to be able to secure navigation signals, things that are all essential for victory on Earth.
Mm-hmm.
There's something else that the Chinese have to achieve, the PLA has to achieve, and that is control over the high ground.
Mm-hmm.
And today the high ground is the moon, and soon after that, Mars. If you control the moon and Mars, as well as the Lagrangian points of equal gravitational pull that exist around the Earth and the moon, that enable you to put a satellite, a surveillance satellite perhaps, and maintain it with less expenditure of energy, so that you can see what's going on all around. You have to be able to dominate the moon and Mars. And we see a very definite Chinese effort to accomplish this goal. For a long time, as it proceeded through the steps of its manned spaceships, the Shenzhou missions, then the early small practice space stations, and then the unmanned probes that have been sent to the moon, China has been coy about its plans for manned moon presence and on the moon and Mars. But in the last year, there has been a kind of a waterfall of revelation,
Mm-hmm.
data points, revelations of new space launchers, moon landing platforms, and the such. It's now possible to say that China plans to put people on the moon probably well before 2030. It's developing a 25 to 27 ton to the moon space launch vehicle that could be launched as early as 2024, 2025. And then it will follow that with a 50 to 60 ton to the moon space launch vehicle expected to start testing in 2028. And then we had a revelation just last November in China Daily of all places,
Mhm.
a statement by the China Aerospace Science and Technology Corporation, which is the dominant space system provider for the PLA China, that in the first 6 years of the next decade, China may intend to build 60 of its Long March 9, 50 to 60 ton to the moon, super heavy space launch vehicles. I estimate that 40 of those Long March 9s might be sufficient to build 10 moon bases. Now, they also have the option of starting to begin putting people on Mars.
Mhm.
It may take more of that number of Long March 9s to start building a presence on Mars. But by 2040, China is going to be heavily populating the moon. And if we're not keeping up, if we're not investing in nuclear space propulsion so that we can lower the cost and increase the speed of reaching the moon and Mars, then China will have the most people on the moon and Mars. And with that, and all of that, their entire presence will be dual use, just like the current Chinese space program is dual use. Everything that can be used for a military purpose in space most likely will be used for a military purpose in space. And this is natural. It's the People's Liberation Army that controls the entire Chinese space program. There's no such thing as a civilian space sector in China. So everything that China puts into space, puts on the moon, puts on the Mars, will be with a mind to making it dual use, to making sure that it has military capabilities as well as everything else that they intend to ship to these planets.
So, Professor Fisher, do you see a handshake between ISRO, India's Indian Space Research Organization, and NASA doing something, in this regards?
Well, I would certainly hope that our dear friends in India are considering the implications here. Were India to instead go the other way, I mean, India already is very invested in Russian space technology. One can see this already in your initial manned space capsule. Probably, I would hasten probably in your early small space station as well. An economy in which just the resources of asteroids, the resources of the moon and the Mars, far exceeding that we can find on Earth, contributes to the wealth of nations. The Chinese want to set up toll booths on Mars, the moon, the Lagrangian points to determine who benefits from the space economy. The challenge for the democracies, in my opinion, is to prevent this from happening, is to ensure that our sovereign governments retain sovereign choice in making sure that our people benefit from this future space economy. I think that suggests that the democracies should be allied in purpose, strategy, and expenditures. But the same can be said for strategic cooperation on Earth. China wants to be the hegemon. China wants to deny freedoms. China wants to control all the apps on your phone so that, like in China, you have to wake up in the morning and sing the praises of the Chinese Communist Party, or else your social credit score isn't high enough for your kid to go to university. That's the future that China wants for all of us. And it is really up to the democracies to prevent this from happening in the Quad, in bilateral cooperation, wherever. I would certainly hope and pray that our friends in India still want to remain free and would join with the democracies to defend that freedom.
So that's a very well put thought, Professor Fisher. So looking at it from a more philosophical perspective, you're talking about implosions happening in the Chinese on the Chinese side itself. Let me, as a final this thing of this session, what are the possibilities of defections or fallouts within PLA with CCP? If that happens, how will it start and entirely shape up?
Well, the Chinese Communist Party has made this assessment very early in its history. It is a dictatorship reliant on the loyalty, unflinching loyalty of its military services, its military power. So from the beginning, the party has gone to the maximum degree to assure that the People's Liberation Army is loyal. There is a Commissar Corps that mirrors the officer corps at every level. The PLA is probably heavily infiltrated by covert observers, spies. It is able to detect even the most minor private conversation and hold that against you to a conversation or a beer to a bullet in the back of the head. The party is hyper paranoid about the loyalty of the PLA and has been so throughout its history. So yes, on the other hand, if the hegemony of the Chinese Communist Party is to be avoided, that cannot happen without the help, the defection, the protest, the betrayal of the People's Liberation Army. So yes, it is important that we have as much and varied dialogue with the PLA as possible. But I think we also have to be upfront with them. We can't coddle them. We can't be nice on the border. We have to use every opportunity to tell them that the party is going to accelerate the destruction of all people in China. It is going to risk massive nuclear holocausts around the world, and that you, private, major, corporal, colonel, PLA officer, it's your job to save us all from that. And that we have to continue to give that message and make sure it's carried to the top, up and down their chain of command constantly. We need to inundate them.
Or else the implosion can go to a full-blown or times 1,000 of the Tiananmen Square protest, the way, as we started this conversation with. Professor Fisher, thank you so much for your time and your valuable inputs. We'll like to have you, again on Diplomacy Direct on a later date again. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vipul.
Everybody, please like and subscribe, and that motivates us to bring our esteemed speakers like Professor Fisher. Thank you so much. You have a great day. Bye.